been quite a month, hasn't it? Mindfulness. Talk about stretching us. My gosh, we started this journey at the beginning of the month with Mind the Mind, where we just started talking about our thoughts and being conscious of them, checking in on them, minding them, changing them if they were not supporting us or supporting if they were not serving the us that we have come to be or we're becoming. And then we went on to Be Here Now, which was talking about not getting lost in regret of the past or worry about the future, but bringing ourselves fully present. Being here now, being with our thoughts in the present moment. And then we discussed the power of that, the power of present tense, where we explored the power of our word to change the conditions around us, that our word has great power in the present moment. And so we must be present for it to outpicture as the conditions around our lives. So it's all about the present moment. All of our power, all of our love, all of our joy, all of our abundance and our unity, it's all in the present moment. All of our divine inheritance unfolds now, unfolds in this eternal now. So that brings us to today's talk, which is now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time. Yeah, and you said sitting there going, for what? For what? We're talking about being. We're talking about being in the present moment. We're talking about knowing what we're thinking. We're talking about not getting lost, while we're driving, in the past or in the future. It's about taking control of our thoughts for a specific condition and to change that condition, to transform our lives by our thoughts. Now is the time. Now is the time the rubber meets the road. Now is the time you put those things into practice. We've been talking about them. Now is the time. We are the people. Let's set about doing what is in front of us to do, doing the work. And I'm not asking that we transform the world. I'm saying we can transform ourselves. We transform ourselves. And then when we do that, we transform our little corner of the world. We give permission for those people around us to change just in our presence. We transform ourselves. We transform part of our world. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of this particular faith tradition, Science of Mind and Spirit, he said everything begins in consciousness. Everything begins with the thought. And then it outpictures in some condition. So it's not up to us to run around fixing things at the level of the condition. We're just swapping one condition for another condition. It's up to us to change the consciousness behind the condition. Change the consciousness, and then a new outpicturing occurs. There is such a huge difference. Do you hear that? There's a big difference between trying to fix stuff and changing our thoughts about it and allowing that to come to pass in the world. We don't try to fix what's broken. We don't address things at the level of the condition. We go back to cause. We go back to the truth. We stand in the truth of what is, whether or not we see it. We stand in the truth of what is, and we allow that to come to pass. We talk about protesting the war. We don't protest the war. We proclaim peace. We proclaim peace in the midst of chaos. We proclaim peace. We demonstrate love. We don't try to fight against all of those things about that's showing up as less than love. We demonstrate love. Does that make sense? We proclaim heaven. We don't fight or run from hell. We proclaim heaven right where we are. So now is the time. Now is the time to do that. Now is the time to stand in the truth of these principles, to know what that is and what that means. Now is the time to accept our oneness and not get lost in duality. Not try to fight against duality. Not try to fight the us against them war. But to stand in the truth of our oneness and to know a greater truth about what's going on. Now is our time to put that knowledge into action. And Ernest Holmes said this in his book, The Power of an Idea. He said, we must remember that very frequently it takes what we call time for events to transpire. And therefore we should realize that the growth of thought into experience may take time to mature. But he who trusts in God will not make haste. He will not be confused. He will contemplate the object of his desire and believe he has it whether or not he sees it. He will know that always, by the silent process of the law, the harvest is gradually taking form. So what we know is we put that in mind. We know the truth for ourselves, whether or not we see it in the condition, and then conditions begin to change around us. And now is the time, because now is the only time we have. It's always now, isn't it? It's always now. So now is the only time we have. Now is when everything happens. Now is where our power lies. Now is where our abundance is. Now is where the love of Spirit resides. Now is where the truth is. Now is the time to do the work, because now is the only time we have. It is the only time we have. And the Palm Sunday story is really a story about now. It's a story about the only time that we have is now. Jesus rides into town, the peaceful king, right, on a donkey with palms, with people lying, putting down their cloaks on the ground. And they didn't understand when he said, "My kingdom is not of this world, but in this world." They didn't get it. They didn't understand when he said, "My enemies are not in Rome, but my enemies are hatred and prejudice and violence in people's hearts." They didn't understand it. They didn't understand him when he said, "I came to set people free." They thought he was talking about the political freedom from Rome. They didn't get it when he said that freedom was freedom from hatred, from the need to control and conquer other human beings. He said, "I have come to set people free." And they didn't understand that kind of kingdom at all. Jesus' ministry was one of hope and healing. It was one of redemption. He proclaimed the presence of God in the lives of everyone, including the disenfranchised. He told stories, and he taught lessons about a loving God. A loving God. He proclaimed the principle of the living Spirit Almighty alive and demonstrating in every human being. And he said to love God is to love our neighbors, to love oneself, and to love each other as we love Spirit. And since we know in the science of mind and spirit that God is all there is, right? That is our core concept number one. God is all there is. Then to love our neighbor is to love ourselves. Isn't that not true? There's only God in whatever form it's showing up. So to love oneself and to love one's neighbor is, in fact, loving ourselves and loving spirits, and spirit is all there is. Jesus stood in the truth of that unity. He stood in the truth of that unity regardless of conditions. And he spoke from that truth, and that is the time that it is. That's the time it is now. We don't fight against duality anymore. We stand in the truth of our unity regardless of what the conditions look like. We don't protest hate, but we let love ooze from every pore of our bodies. We stand in the truth of that love. We don't try to combat ignorance. We stand in the truth of God's wisdom flowing through us. God's life is the very life of all beings everywhere. You and he and me and spirit, we are all one. We are all here living the life of spirit, knowing of itself in form as us. So it is God addressing God in form is what it is. Every life is the life of God expressing. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, "My love goes out to everyone in the world. I do not exclude anything, for I love all nature and everything that is. My love warms and lightens everything it touches. It goes out to all places. The love flowing through me is a power to all who come in contact with it, and all who feel and know that I love. Love within me is complete and perfect." That's what time it is. That's what time it is. It's time to step up and live that. Live that unconditional love. Live that unity in the world. Be that place. So I think of Jesus standing there, right at the gates of the town. maybe not literally. I mean, who knows? I don't know. But I see that in my mind before he walks into town, standing at that choice point. Stay or go. Go into town, leave town. Right before that point of no return, standing there, maybe outside of space and time, maybe seeing clearly past, present, and future and what was to come, and choosing to ride into town anyway. Choosing to go anyway. That's how the story is presented to us, right? He knew the outcome, and he chose to proceed. And Ernest Holmes says we cannot live a choiceless life. Every day, every moment, every second, there is choice. If it were not so, we would not be individuals. So Jesus recognized this choice point. He recognized it was time to put the rubber to the road. It was time to demonstrate unconditional love. It was time to demonstrate unity regardless of the conditions. The Palm Sunday story speaks to us of surrendering, giving way to that greater idea of what Spirit has for our life. To stand in the truth of our unity, to stand in the truth of our love, to stand in the truth of our joy, regardless of conditions, and allowing Spirit to make of our life what it will make. He was yielding to that greater life. He was allowing the present moment to have its way with him. He said yes to what was in front of him to do. He said yes. Giancarlo Menotti said this. He said, hell begins on the day when God grants us a clear vision of all we might have achieved, of all the gifts which we have wasted, of all that we might have done that we did not do. Because we are beings of free will, we get to choose. We get to choose to say no. We get to choose to turn our backs on our gifts. But not the people in this room, because we're awake. We have awakened. We're in the process of awakening. This teaching, these principles are here to be lived, to be demonstrated. They awaken us, and they continue to awaken us to the truth of our greatness, of what Spirit has in store for us, of the large life that we are a part of. And now is the time. The Palm Sunday story teaches us this. It teaches us that we can surrender, that it's safe to surrender. We can surrender to the world. We don't have to fight against the world. We can stand in the truth of our being and know who and what we are. And if the world calls something from us, that we are open and clear vessels to demonstrate that, to allow Spirit to flow through us into the world and to give that gift that we have in the world. And it also teaches us humility. The Palm Sunday story teaches us the humility, right, that we can all use. Sometimes we do take on that cloak of humility. Sometimes we do ride in on the colt of an ass. You know, Jesus chose the donkey on purpose because a horse would have indicated he was a warrior, because armies go into battle on horses. He could have chosen a camel, but camel represented wealth, great wealth in that region. And so he chose that colt on purpose because of the humility of it. And that's okay. And that's okay. And we can show up in our lives humble and just do the work in front of us also. And the Palm Sunday story talks to us about being still and listening, standing at the gates, really listening to that still small voice. And when we come into alignment with it, then we can allow it to use us in the world, to be that place of healing, to be the place of unity. Even if we don't see it around us, even if the conditions are chaos or war or less than love, we stand in the truth of our being, and we're that. We are that in the world. And we change our little part of the world because we stand in the truth of our being. We cannot just keep reading about this stuff and talking about it on Sunday and rationalizing and discussing. Now's the time to be that in the world. Now is the time to show up and be that in the world, in spite of anything around us, in spite of the conditions. Because when we continue to stand in the truth of our being, the conditions will change to reflect that. They always do. Ernest Holmes said this in Living Without Fear. He said, we think of Jesus the way shower as a divinely inspired personality, a teacher of man, a lover of humanity, and a spiritual genius. This conscious knowledge of God, which impregnated the mind of the man Jesus, we think of as the Christ, or the Christ consciousness. To worship this personality is idolatry. To believe God gave more of itself to this man than to any other human is superstition. And to think the word of Jesus had the power to change the natural order of reality or to refute natural laws is ignorance. Jesus was here to show us a way to be the great example, not to be the great exception. And we take that story and we apply it to our lives because that's the point of it, to apply it to our own life. We stand at the doorway all the time, don't we? Every choice we make, we're standing at the doorway. We stand at the gateway of our own Jerusalem, and we have to make our own choice because we're at choice all the time. Are we going to live the greater life? Are we going to choose to take on that mantle of greatness? Are we going to choose to consciously be that outpicturing of spirit in form and everything that means? The greater love, the greater peace, the greater unity. Are we going to choose to do that? Because now is the time. Now is the time. We are the people. Meister Eckhart said this. He said, it is your destiny to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels. How is that possible? How? He goes on to say, because divine love cannot defy its very self. Divine love will be eternally true to its own being, and its being is giving all it can in every moment. And the greatest gift God can give is its own experience. Every object, every creature, every man, woman, and child has a soul, and it is the destiny of all to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels, and to be as God is. That's real clear. Now is the time. Now is the time to let go of our littleness. Now is the time to live the whole life of God's, all of the beauty, all of the joy, all of the wholeness, all of the wisdom and unity. Now is the time. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, what are we waiting for, right? Now is the time. It is so much easier to drop the phony story of littleness and to take on the mantle of greatness, to take on the mantle of oneness, to be who we are meant to be in the world. What are we waiting for? You want an engraved invitation? You want a sign from the universe? Here's your sign from the universe. Now is the time. We are the people. You've got your sign. No more excuses. Now is the time to be that in the world. We've talked about it. We've spent a whole month in mindfulness. We know the truth of our being. We know the truth of our being. Now it is time to be that in the world, to transform our little corner of the world, whatever your corner happens to be. And by you standing in the truth, you give permission for all of those people around you to transform in your presence. Now is the time. Thank you so much.